Thank you again, everyone. My name is Sky. I work with Schneps Media, the largest local media company in the New York metro area. We publish over 70 newspapers, magazines, webinars, and events throughout Queens, Brooklyn, Manhattan, the Bronx, Westchester, Long Island, and Philadelphia. This webinar is being recorded today and can be accessed on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/schnepsmedia. So today's webinar is entitled Holiday Family Gatherings Are a Time to Assess Older Loved Ones. These gatherings are not just good for catching up, they are an opportunity to assess your older loved one's status and needs, which is pertinent right now around holiday time. So we will discuss today the clues that can reveal a decline in mental or physical abilities. And Melissa here from Cona Elder Law will run through what these factors are and changes in these factors, such as physical appearance, household cleanliness, changes in behavior, mean that it's time to start this conversation about long-term care, wishes, and plans. So again, if you're tuning in today in our live audience, please use the chat or Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and type in any questions that you have, and we'll get to everyone's questions as they come up or save them till the end of the webinar, depending on the type of question. So right now I'm joined by Cona Elder Law Senior Partner, Melissa Negrin-Wiener, for this webinar to discuss with us the importance of making sure your loved one has a power of attorney, a healthcare proxy, and living will, so that you have the legal authority to help, as well as the ability to get information about finances and healthcare. So welcome, Melissa, and let's start by giving everyone your background and experience working in this field.
Good morning. Thank you, Sky. Happy to be here this morning. As Sky said, my name is Melissa Negrin-Wiener. I am a senior partner with Cona Elder Law. I have actually been with Cona Elder Law for 20 years now. This is the sole area of law in which I practice and have for the last 20 years. I head up the Medicaid and estate planning departments here at the firm. But we also, of course, handle everything from guardianships to estate administration, estate litigation, just anything that we really need to do to help our clients, help seniors. Recently, we've been dealing with a lot of insurance issues and just trying to help people get everything, sorted out and get them on the right track with their insurances. So really anything that involves, helping out this senior citizen population.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head, if there are any factors or things that you've been working on, maybe more now since the pandemic, that people should be aware of.
Yeah, so there's been a lot of changes. One of the biggest changes that has kind of come out of the pandemic is the decrease in home health aides that are available to help. So while we are, able to help people get Medicaid and things like that so that they can have help in the home, it's very difficult to staff those cases. So that's one of the things that has changed, really, us getting in there and trying to help people find home health aides, which was not something that we really needed to do in the past. So yeah, there have been some changes and some different things that have come up over the past year and a half, for sure.
And the last we spoke, we did a webinar together in October, and it was called the Elder Law Triangle. So how does that tie into what we are going to cover today?
So the Elder Law Triangle is really the kind of three things that go into the elder law and estate planning. And that's the medical, the financial, and the emotional decisions, right? So, of course, all three of those things are typically involved when you're deciding on living arrangements, whether, it's going to be at home or assisted living, or perhaps moving to another state to be near a child. There's a million different options, but what goes into making those decisions, you have to look at the financial piece, the medical piece, and the emotional piece. And it really ties into what we're talking about today. And this is something that comes up this time of year every single year. We talk about, the family gatherings and, things to look for and ways to kind of check in on the older members of your family. And this year, more important than ever, because this year is the first time maybe in 2 years that people are seeing loved ones, that perhaps they kind of stayed away from during last holiday season because of the pandemic. And now, unfortunately things were quieting down and people were making plans, and now things have picked up again. So, but we're assuming there's going to be a lot more family gatherings this year than there were last.
Right. So do we want to run through, Melissa, some of these factors that maybe families should be aware of?
Yeah, sure. So what we, really stress for people to be aware of and look at are, first of all, physical appearance and household cleanliness. So, your loved ones, right? So if we're talking about like a mother or a father, how they typically, dress, how they carry themselves, what their home looks like. So looking for things like, are they wearing clean clothing? If you're with them for more than one day, did they change their clothing? Are they doing anything that is kind of out of the ordinary? Like, for example, sleeping with their shoes on, or, maybe wearing something inside out, things like that. Also just looking around the house, for cleanliness. Mom always kept such a clean house, and now all of the sudden, the garbage is piling up, or the bathrooms aren't clean, food wrappers all over the place. So things like that, people should really look out for. Especially like clutter is a big thing too, because obviously that will then create possibly a fall risk, right? A hazard for somebody to trip and fall. So those are the kinds of things that you want to look for there. Also, we want to look at changes in behavior. Again, these are people that, you've been part of their life forever. So you're going to notice changes like, napping in the middle of the day, where maybe that wasn't something that they always, did, or going up to bed earlier. Anything that's like a change of their personality, like maybe drawing out of the conversation. Sometimes people will pull themselves out of a conversation because they know that they're having some cognitive issues and they don't want anybody to see it. They don't want to forget something or say something silly or something that doesn't, make sense.
Mhm.
So they'll withdraw when they used to be very chatty and, very much part of all of the conversations. Finances are a big thing to pay attention to. Of course, unopened mail, making sure that, they're getting their mail, they're opening their financial statements, just seeing what's what. If you can, take a look at a financial statement. Are there large transactions? God forbid somebody's taking advantage of them, they're writing checks, those types of things you want to make sure that you're paying attention to. Paying attention to, physically to their mobility. Do they need to be walking with a walker? Do they need to be in a wheelchair? Are they unsteady on their feet? These are all things that are changes. Sometimes people will say to me, I looked up and all of a sudden my parents were old, like you need to just kind of pay attention to those types of changes. And also make sure that their environment is safe for those types of changes. Like maybe they need to pull out their carpeting if they're tripping, if they're starting to maybe not pick up their feet, that kind of thing. And then just the dangers and the hazards of the home as well. If there are stairs in the home and, there's carpeting on the stairs and, all things related to that.
So if some families notice some of these factors and changes with their loved ones this holiday season, what are the options? Because I know this is very difficult. Like you mentioned, it's emotional. So what is the first step in having this conversation? Do you have it with the loved one? Do you just come to see a lawyer? Like what's the first step
Right.
in initiating a change?
It is emotional and every family is different. So it's really going to be a matter of, I think, discussing it with, say, siblings, if you have siblings, or perhaps addressing mom and dad together as a united front, the siblings. If you don't have siblings, just talking to your parents directly. If you have one surviving parent, obviously, talking to them directly, and then, making sure that they have things in place so that you as the child or family member can help them. And that's when you had mentioned earlier about the power of attorney, the healthcare proxy. That's the first step, really. I mean, listen, I'm not going to get on my soapbox and say that everybody should have these documents anyway, but they should. But that being said, if they don't, that's really the first step, because things will now start to happen, right? And you may have to step in and handle financial affairs or handle healthcare decisions. And if you don't have those documents in place, you're going to really be, everything's going to be a hurdle. Everything's going to be a bump in the road. So making sure that, mom and dad have a power of attorney so they can name you to handle finances, pay bills, move assets if necessary so that they can qualify for government benefits. Making sure that you're the healthcare proxy so that you can get all the information from the doctors, help make medical decisions if if something happens. It's really so important to have that in place. And then you can kind of start the conversation of, do you want to stay in this house? Are the steps too much for you? Where do you want to live? Do we want to look at assisted living? It's a lot. And sometimes people will bring their family members in with them, to see an attorney, and we'll have the conversation together.
Mm-hmm. Right. And some of those documents are like what you need immediately, but you mentioned assisted living. What other sorts of long-term care plans are available for families? How do families learn about the options?
Yeah. So one of the things we really try to do is be a resource for our clients and take a holistic approach and look at the whole situation, as opposed to kind of just, throwing things at them and you need to do this, you need to do that. We talk about, okay, maybe sometimes in some situations, people are very attached to their home and they just don't want to leave their home. So how do we make that work? Do we apply for Medicaid? Do we need a home health aide in the house? Maybe things aren't that bad yet. Maybe they can just hire a companion a couple hours a day to make sure that, somebody's watching out for mom, that kind of thing as an option. And then, of course, there's assisted living, which we just talked about. There are some assisted livings here that in New York that accept Medicaid. So, we'll talk about that as an option, depending on how much money the person has, what their income is, whether or not they're a veteran and they're entitled to an additional benefit. So there's a lot of kind of thought that goes into that and whether assisted living is a good option. And then, of course, there's nursing home care, for the situation where somebody needs that higher level of care. And then we talk about, of course, asset protection and applying for Medicaid and helping getting the cost covered for nursing home care.
Right. It's very dense. I remember in the elder law triangle webinar, we went through the different options and people had a ton of questions about it. So again, live audience, I see some questions coming in already, but if you have any questions, please type them in and we will go through it. One of the questions actually that came in is from Miguel. He is a funeral director in Lake Ronkonkoma. He's looking to learn more so he can serve families. Can you tell me how I can tie your information on elder law to educate the families that come into the funeral home?
Sure. Hi, Miguel. You can certainly reach out. We work with a lot of different funeral homes because part of an estate plan is setting up a prepaid funeral. So it's something I remember the first time I heard about it, I was kind of like, I don't really get that, but you can actually go and sit down with somebody and with a funeral director and plan everything and pick everything out and pay for everything. And for purposes of estate planning, it's a good use of funds to pull funds out of your estate for estate tax purposes and things like that, but also for Medicaid planning because it's an exempt transfer for Medicaid purposes. So we do work with a lot of different funeral homes and funeral directors, and we have a lot of information that we can provide if you would like to reach out.
And even knowing about what's covered by Social Security or these other options, what money is saved, is that something you discuss with clients as well? Because sometimes the benefits could be confusing.
Yes, often the benefits are confusing because you have Social Security, retirement, and then there's also Social Security disability, and then there's supplemental security income through Social Security for people who have low income. And then there's, of course, Medicare, and there's health insurance, and there's Medicaid. So it can get very complicated very quickly. Typically, we're able to sit down with a family and kind of cross out, most of those things that this doesn't pertain to your situation. Let's just focus on, these items and go from there.
So how do you help advise which options are best for families? And they come in and they learn from you, and how do you help them make that decision?
Mostly it's just talking through it. It's obviously you're talking to family members. Typically it's adult children, right? And they know their parents obviously better than you do. So, I'll say something like, well, with assisted living, you're going to have that socialization, right? Mom or dad will be able to, go on trips, or, they have happy hour every day and things like that. And they'll say something like, either, oh, mom will love that, or, no, my mom doesn't socialize. She doesn't talk to people. She just wants to be alone, and so that way you can kind of start framing the plan. Well, if the person's not going to take advantage of all of the benefits of assisted living, maybe we want to look at home care. Whereas somebody who is a social person and who would enjoy those things, perhaps that person wouldn't want to be at home with just one other individual all day long. So, you have to kind of get a gauge on the individual themselves and go over all the options and see what's the best fit. There are also assisted livings that have care plan packages, so they'll provide certain levels of care. There are others that don't have that. So maybe for somebody who doesn't have as much of a need, you're going to go and look at those places. So it's really important that, you kind of get down and dirty in there and know exactly what's going on with this individual, who they are.
Right. So if you want to take your parent to an assisted living and go through the costs with the assisted living facility, when do you enter the conversation as the attorney to sort of help the family decide what benefits could cover the costs associated with that facility?
So I would say most of the time families will come to us before they've started looking, and they'll kind of give us the overarching story, and we'll say something like, have you considered, assisted living, and go from there. But sometimes they come and they say, I went to look at this assisted living or that assisted living, and I'm not sure. And, and then again, we'll go through finances. What are their parents able to pay for? The last thing you want to do is put somebody in a situation where they can be in this place for 7 or 8 months and then they have to leave because they can't afford it after that. Mm-hmm. So you want to make sure that whatever plan you're putting in place is something that's sustainable. Especially if the person has, the beginnings of dementia or anything like that. You don't want to have to be moving them from place to place to place if you don't have to.
Right. And you mentioned dementia, and that brings us to our next question here from Rena. She said, I waited too long to get a power of attorney, and mom now has dementia. She's in and out of lucidity and only trusts me sometimes. Can I get the necessary legal processes done without her approval or involvement?
Great question. So when we meet with somebody, typically to do these advanced directives, power of attorney, healthcare proxy, living will, a lot of times we're making a capacity assessment. Do they understand what we're asking them. Do they understand what they're signing? Do they know who their children are? Do they know what their finances are? It sounds to me like Raina might say to me, no, mom can't have that conversation. So unfortunately, in that type of situation, most likely you'd have to bring a guardianship proceeding. And that's for, in any situation where there's no power of attorney, there's no healthcare proxy, and the individual can no longer sign those documents or understand them. And there's things that need to be done, for example, healthcare decisions to be made, or perhaps asset transfers to be made for planning for Medicaid to qualify for Medicaid. There's a very, very little chance that the child's going to be able to do any of that without going through a guardianship proceeding. Becoming mom's legal guardian, it's a court process. It takes time and it's expensive. But sometimes, that's where we end up, because unfortunately, the documents have to be done, and they also have to be correct. I mean, a lot of times I have people come in who have the documents, but they're not the correct forms.
In that case with the guardian, could then Raina become her mom's guardian? Or is it like, I saw this movie about court appointed guardians. I forgot the name of it, but it was this woman that had this big scam where she would be appointed the guardian and then make money and sell the house and stuff like that.
Yeah, I saw that movie too. I think it was called I Care a Lot or something.
Yeah, that's what it was. I Care a Lot. That's what it was.
Yeah, that was very, very disturbing. Yes, Raina could petition the court to become her mom's legal guardian. The court process for guardianship is, in my experience, quite different than what you would see in that movie. The court appoints a court evaluator, which is a disinterested third party who would essentially, talk to all the family members, meet mom, talk to the daughter who's petitioning, and they're the eyes and ears of the court. So they're going to let the court know, this is appropriate, this isn't appropriate, this person is the right person or not the right person. So, there's a lot more oversight, but she could absolutely petition the court to be mom's guardian.
Okay. And again, anyone out there that has questions, please feel free to type them in. And Melissa here is the expert and will answer your questions. Okay, Michelle has a question. Is the power of attorney the only option? My husband is 65 and he's okay now, but in the event that he or I become disabled or need guardianship, will it revert automatically to the spouse? We are legally married.
So just because these are great questions. Just because you are legally married does not mean that you have the ability to handle each other's finances. Joint accounts are a different story. If you're joint account holders, typically, you would be able to move things around. I've seen spouses try to, take their husband, say, off an account and had difficulty not being power of attorney, because the bank's always going to watch out for, making sure that they're not doing something that puts somebody else in jeopardy, right? Just like the doctors are going to do the same thing with healthcare decisions. So the important thing to note is that just because you're married to each other does not mean that you have the ability to go, say, to your husband's, IRA and change a beneficiary or withdraw money or change a distribution if you're not power of attorney. So anytime that an individual has an account in their name alone, there's really nobody with the legal authority to do anything with that account unless they have power of attorney.
Okay, so thinking about that, then are there any benefits or things that people should look out for, like a benefit of being married in this situation? Or legally, it's completely separate.
It's completely separate. The only thing on the medical side is in New York State, we have something called the Family Healthcare Decisions Act, where if there is no healthcare proxy document, the doctors can go to this kind of pre-made list of people that they can speak to and take direction from. And if you're married, the first person on that list is going to be your spouse, unless you have a guardian, which you probably wouldn't in this case, but would be your spouse. So if there's no healthcare proxy in place, then your spouse would essentially be that first person who would have decision-making power. The reason why we don't like to hang our hat on the Family Healthcare Decisions Act is if there's no spouse, the next person in line is your child. And if you have more than one child, you can potentially have a problem. So it's important to have the document so you can choose who you want making those decisions.
So what you're saying is in a healthcare decision, if you're married, then decisions could automatically be made by a spouse, but only in healthcare decisions?
Right.
That's interesting. Okay, so then follow up from Michelle. So when and how should we have a power of attorney?
So our recommendation is always at 18 years old, everybody should have a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy. 18. That's the, once you turn 18, nobody in the world has the legal authority to do anything on your behalf anymore. So, it's funny. I have had, people come in, and I always mention this because this is I think a really big issue that parents will say to me, wait, my kid's in college. She's 18, but I pay for school and I pay for her apartment and I pay for her books and I completely support her. What do you mean I can't, talk to the doctor if she's in the hospital or something like that? And the answer is you can't. Once somebody turns 18, the parents no longer have any legal authority. Mm-hmm. And so if the child is in the hospital and conscious and can say to the doctor, go ahead and talk to my mom, then that's fine. But if they're not conscious, if they're not able to communicate and say that, the parent has as much chance of getting information as they do, about a stranger on the street. Mm-hmm. So we highly recommend that anybody who's 18 or older speak to an attorney, get the documents in place. A lot of people will try to download these documents off the internet. Unfortunately, many of those documents are not proper documents. So, I don't recommend doing it that way. I think that, doing it through an attorney would be the safest bet.
Mm-hmm. Another question here. Does your office also offer life insurance advice or policies?
We do not sell life insurance. We will talk with people about policies that they have and answer questions to the extent that we can. But we have excellent contacts and resources where we can bring somebody in, with a life insurance background if we need to, if there's something that needs to be changed or something that needs to be done, and we can work with other professionals.
Now, another question, once someone has a power of attorney, can it be indicated to be used only in certain circumstances?
Yes. So the power of attorney is an interesting document. There's a lot of powers listed on the document itself, and you can initial certain powers that you want to give to somebody. Or you can initial the bottom of the document, which means you're giving all the powers. So, every case is different. And we can go over with people what each power means, and people can pick and choose which powers they want to give. There's also something called a springing power of attorney. And a springing power of attorney is not something that we do very often or really at all. But what it is a document that doesn't come into existence essentially, or it doesn't work until two doctors have certified that the individual is incapacitated. So the important thing to know about these documents is once they're signed, they're in effect. So if I'm your power of attorney, you don't need to be mentally incapacitated for me to act, right? I can act. I have a fiduciary responsibility to do the right thing, obviously. But some people don't feel comfortable with that, and they don't want their power of attorney to be able to act unless two doctors have certified that you've lost capacity to handle your own matters. We don't typically do that. It's very difficult to have doctors sign off on that kind of thing. If you don't trust the person that you're naming, not to do something inappropriate while you still have capacity, then you're not naming the right person, is how I feel and how I advise my clients.
Mhm. What if someone's power of attorney is someone that they appointed a long time ago, and that person now is incapacitated, and the
But
person who needs the power of attorney is incapacitated?
okay, so the person who needs the power of attorney has no capacity, and the power of attorney agent has no capacity. Okay,
Correct.
so typically we try to always have a backup power of attorney, so a backup individual on the document, because the language of the document will say if the person that you've named is unable or unwilling or unavailable, then I name this person, and to put somebody else in that box. If all the people that are named in the document are not able to act, deceased, or something like that, then we're circling back to the guardianship proceeding.
Wow. That's why these documents are important, everyone. Let's see. If anyone has any questions, again, type them in. Here we go from Elsa. I plan on discussing mom's care during the holidays with my family. Mom is 86 and has Alzheimer's and dementia. We are thinking of looking into assisted living with a memory care center. Do they exist on Long Island? Can you give a roundabout cost? Do they accept Medicaid? We are paying now for a home health aide.
Okay, good questions. So yeah, the memory care units are terrific, and there are many, many assisted livings on Long Island that have memory care units. They're essentially, they're locked units, so there's no wandering and things like that. They have wonderful programs and rec that, to help people who have memory loss. As far as fees go, that's something that you would have to speak directly to the facilities, because they all vary. If your mother, I think she said mother, right?
Mm-hmm.
If your mother or your father, if your father has passed and is a veteran, your mother might be entitled to some veterans benefits, which are very helpful in assisted living settings to get us a little bit more extra income. So that's something that we could help out with. There are some facilities that take Medicaid, some assisted living facilities that take Medicaid in New York State. Whether or not they have those beds available in their memory care unit is a question that you would have to ask them directly. There's an Amber Courts. There are a couple of Bristols that have beds that take Medicaid. There's a place called Maple Point. You could always reach out to us and we could even give you a list, but there are a handful of assisted living facilities that accept Medicaid.
There's a lot of questions coming.
I see the number going up on the.
No, this is great. Thank you, everyone, for submitting the questions. Okay, so in this example, this married couple doesn't have children together, but they each have children from previous relationships who are adults now. Can they get involved with decision making in the event we are incapacitated?
Sure.
I guess
So
it depends on who's the power of attorney out of those kids.
yeah, and again, this is a really good point, and a situation where you really want to have those documents in place, because now you're talking second marriage. Did the kids get along? Do the parents get along with the other person's children?
Right.
There's so much that goes into planning when it's a second marriage. So you want to have your documents in place to make sure that you have the person that you want making decisions. Perhaps you want your spouse making your healthcare decisions, but your children don't want your spouse, then you're going to run into a whole bunch of issues unless you have it documented, and you have it down on paper. So that's really, really important.
Right. So in that example, each couple could assign separate people as their power of attorney. I mean, that could be done anyway.
Absolutely. And I've seen it done so many different ways. I've seen it done where the husband and wife want to name each other. It might be a second marriage, but maybe they're married 25 years. So they want to be each other's power of attorney, and then they'll each name their kid as the backup. They don't have to match. They can have their own people.
Mhm.
In some instances, I've had, the husband name the wife and one of his children together because everybody's on the same page. So it's all about, learning about the family, learning about the relationships and the best way to set it up.
So the next question seems a little complicated, but I think the gist of it is there a way to get a power of attorney for my wife who's in another country?
They would probably have to do it. You have to do it wherever the individual is. So, the person, the wife would have to do it in where she is now. And if she came to the States, then she would do one here.
Okay, so the power of attorney document's only good for where you're living?
It's not really that it's only good for where you're living, but like we tell people, if you're like a snowbird, right? So you're spending half your time in New York and half your time in Florida.
Right.
You should have those documents in those places, right? So when you're there, you can use those documents. If you're on vacation, totally different story. It's not like you're, dealing with two different residences. So if she's living in another country, then she should have that document, whatever their version of that document is, there.
So like you said, a snowbird, right? Someone that lives 6 months in New York and 6 months in Florida, let's say. Do you need two different power of attorney documents, one for New York and one for Florida?
Well, it's just it would be easier, especially like with healthcare decisions, because the documents are so different. So if you're spending an extended period of time in both places, not if you're obviously going on vacation.
Okay.
Then,
Okay. So is that something your office could help with in creating the power of attorney for another state?
It depends on the state, but yes.
Okay. Okay. Another question here. My mother needs a home health aide, but she has Medicare, not Medicaid. How do I get her a home health aide?
Well, you can hire a home health aide and privately pay, but that can get expensive. The other option, of course, is looking into the Medicaid program. We help our clients help them with their asset protection to get them eligible for Medicaid. It's called Community Medicaid for the home health aide. And we also do the applications and take you through the whole process. So that's something that we could certainly discuss. You have to be careful. Right now, there are some changes coming down the pike with Community Medicaid. As of now, there's no look back for Community Medicaid. So most people are familiar with the 5-year look back for nursing home Medicaid, where Medicaid looks back 5 years to see what you've done with your assets to determine whether or not you are going to be penalized and unable to get Medicaid for some period of time. We do not have that in New York with Community Medicaid, but they're planning on instituting a 2.5-year look back at some point. We just don't know what that point is yet because of the pandemic. They keep pushing it. Right now, we're looking at April or July of 2022. So anybody who's looking to do Community Medicaid, now in the next couple of months or whatever it is, should really get looking into it as soon as possible before these changes.
Yeah, Melissa, are there any other changes top of mind for you, like that example, that people should really keep in their minds as the laws and rules are changing into next year?
Really, that's the major change. So what had happened was in October of 2020 is when this all started. And they said any transfers made after October of 2020 are going to be subject to this 2.5-year look back. But the effective date was supposed to be January of 2021, and that never happened. So they pushed it to July of 2021, then they pushed it to September, then they pushed it to January of 2022, which is also now being pushed again. So that's really, it's been, over a period of time, but that's really the major change that's coming up.
Okay, so then what is the first step, attendees, as we come towards the close? We still have some time. So if anyone has any questions, please ask them, but I'll have Melissa begin to tell us the first step that attendees should take after today's webinar as some takeaway thoughts and messages.
Sure. Well, first, I really hope everybody's able to enjoy their holiday season and be with their families now that we have this uptick in COVID again. But really, hopefully you jotted down some of the things that we talked about to look for. Really pay attention to those things and see if there's anything major going on as far as changes in in anything, in health, in cleanliness, like I said, physical appearance, behaviors, and really focus in on that. And then I always suggest people give us a call. There's no charge for a consultation with us. What we do is we send you out a questionnaire, and I find it's very helpful to have that and get all of your mom or dad or whoever it is, get all of their information into one place. Their financial, their family members, their insurances, their retirement, get it all into one place. And then, we can schedule an appointment and have a conversation about their situation, what's going on with them. What are you thinking makes sense going forward? Obviously, we'll make some suggestions, and then talking about how we can, meet with them, get their documents into place, talk to them about who they want to name as their agents, and at least get that kind of estate planning piece in place. And then if there's more of a need as time moves forward, then we can work on the Medicaid applications and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there any other questions out there, everyone? Please type them in if you have them. But Melissa, is there anything that we didn't cover that you would like to cover?
I think that, again, I can't stress enough, how important it is to, if you're not local to where your parents are living, and that's very common these days, making sure that there's a friend or a neighbor or somebody that's checking in and looking out for any of these major changes that we talked about, especially with COVID and not being able to travel as often as you might like. Or set up, FaceTime or Zoom for them so that you can kind of see what's going on in the background. You can see them. You can, talk to them a little bit about what they've been doing and things like that. When you're there, I left this one out. Big one is check the refrigerator. Are things expired? Do they have food? Those kinds of things as well. But the only thing we didn't really touch on was Medicaid eligibility, which in and of itself, an entire webinar. But of course, if it's on your mind, if you're thinking about, how am I going to get mom or dad eligible to be able to, get a home health aide or go into an assisted living that accepts Medicaid or even go to a nursing home, that's what we do. So that's, another reason you could pick up the phone and give us a call to talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Another question here from Dennis. Dad is 93 and in an assisted living facility. Is there any way to protect assets to qualify for VA aid? Do we know what that stands for? And attendance benefit?
Yes. So the VA aid and attendance benefit is what I was alluding to earlier about possibly being eligible for a benefit that could get you some extra income. And that's aid and attendance. So if it's dad that's the veteran and he's in the assisted living, he could get up to close to $2,000 a month in extra income if he's eligible. The problem is that a couple of years ago, the VA decided they were going to put a 3-year look back on these benefits where there never was one before. So we could transfer assets and have, somebody be eligible. So we can certainly talk about, there's a lot of really funny rules with aid and attendance. I won't get into them right now. But not every asset that your father has is a countable asset. So it's worth a conversation to talk about what he does have, because some of it may not count as an asset in their eyes. And so he may be eligible, or it may be easy to make him eligible. So certainly worth a conversation. We do the aid and attendance applications free of charge. So if you want to give us a call to talk about it, we certainly can.
And again, this webinar is recorded and we'll put Melissa's contact information out there for anyone that wants to have a follow-up conversation. Lana has a question. What is the age requirement for Medicaid and Medicare?
Well, Medicare is 65. Medicaid, you can qualify at 65 unless you're disabled. If you're disabled, you can be under 65.
Okay. We see someone raise their hand. If you have a question, you can type it in, please. Any other concluding thoughts, Melissa, as we give people the opportunity to pose more questions?
Well, I always like to kind of tell people, it's very important when we sit down with the family to talk about all the people above and below in the family tree, right? So if we're talking about doing planning for a couple who's nearing retirement, whose parents may be still living and, perhaps in a nursing home or assisted living, and then they have children who, and they may have grandchildren as well. And, it's important to really look at the whole picture. And if you're talking to somebody and you're doing any kind of planning, whether it's financial or legal or anything, and they're just talking about you and they're not asking about those other people, it's not the right fit. You need to know, because anything that I do could impact my parents. It could impact my children, especially if there are children with disabilities involved. Anything my parents do could affect my children. So it's really important to make sure that you know what's going on, really up and down the line, and that you talk to your attorney about that when you're entering into this type of estate planning or Medicaid planning, because there's a lot of different scenarios that can come up and ways to really make sure you're protecting for everybody. So that's really something that I would stress to people, that you make sure if you're dealing with a professional in any of those areas, if you're with your family this season and you see anything funny that you want to address, and you're talking to a professional, that you're talking about the entire family and not just that one individual person, because it's important.
Right. So to round this out, this webinar, really, we talked about holiday family gatherings and how they're a good time to assess older loved ones. And Melissa went through some of the factors that families can look out for: physical appearance, household cleanliness, changes in behavior, monitoring finances, mobility, looking out for environmental dangers. So these are some of the signs and symptoms that it may be time to have a conversation about long-term care wishes and plans. So thank you so much, Melissa Negrin-Wiener, partner at Cona Elder Law, for having this conversation with us. And again, you'll have everyone's contact information of who participated in this webinar, and we'll be sure to post your website and phone number out there for anyone else who has questions. And someone just asked, I missed most of this podcast. Is there any way to replay? Yes, it's recorded. So you can see it on our website, youtube.com/Schneps Media, where all of our webinars are there. So you can replay it and watch it and send it around to your friends and family. So thank you to our live audience who participated and asked all these great questions, and to Melissa here from Cona Elder Law for providing all this insight to this complicated subject. But everyone's free to reach out to her and ask more questions. So
thank you so much, Sky.
Thank you. Good to see you. Happy holidays.
Thank you. You too. Happy holidays, everybody.